Hi everyone, and welcome back to Trev's Travels by Narrowboat Quiz Part 3. Well, of course, we'll start off with the answers from Part 2, or Part 2, as I should say really in English. And here are the results that everybody gave to the answers coming up on the screen right now. And the answers are as followed. Question number 1, the name of the pub on the Braunston flight. Well, that of course was the Admiral Nelson. When was Braunston Tunnel finished being built? Or when did it open? Well, that was 1796. And the other question to do with the tunnel, what time of the day are wide beams permitted to traverse the tunnel, after of course they've phoned up and booked their passage? That is 8 AM. We travel on down the Grand Union Canal and we come to the junction with the Leicester Arm. I wanted to know what that junction name was. Well, of course it was Norton Junction, and I think everybody got that one right. Actually, most people got every question in this quiz right, so I've either made it far too easy or you're just far too smart for me. I think you're probably just far too smart. And we went up the Leicester line and we come of course to Watford Locks, and I asked the question, how many lock chambers are there at Watford Locks? Well, the answer of course was 7. I did actually ask the number of chambers in case people got confused with the staircase locks there, in case they thought that was 1, so I actually asked for the number of lock chambers. We carried on up the Leicester Arm and we come to the village of Crick. And I asked, what is Crick famous for these days? Well, of course, everybody in the boating world knows this one, the Crick Boat Show. I carried further on up the Leicester Arm and took a right up the Welford Arm, and at the end of the Welford Arm there are still remnants of a couple of old lime kilns, and the question was, there were 7 of these at one time. What were the structures, which of course was lime kilns, and what product came out of them? Well, lime kilns, guess what you get from lime kilns? Oh, lime. So yes, it was lime kilns and lime was the 2-part answers to that question. We came back down the Welford Arm and carried on up the Leicester Arm until of course we got to Foxton. Well, today Foxton is famous for the 2 lots of 5 staircase locks taking you either up or down the flight or the hill. But although the locks were built originally first, they were slow, so at one point in time the inclined plane was built, which was steam operated, and it raised 2 caissons, or it lowered and raised 2 caissons I should say, because when one went up the other one went down, and that was the way of moving boats up and down the hill, which of course is called an inclined plane. And I think you all got that one right as well. Well, I turned around there and came back down the Leicester Arm and headed south on down the Grand Union Canal, down through the Buckby flight, and carried on down to the village of Weedon Beck, normally known these days just by Weedon. And yes, of course, built back in the Napoleonic Wars was the Ordnance, and later on barracks. The Ordnance was built at Weedon Beck as it had a great link of the Grand Union Canal from Weedon Beck to London, and the fright was that the French would invade England, and by putting Weedon Beck in the middle of the country it was hard to get to, but still had great access via the canal, because of course back in these days the canal was the fastest form of transport around. Over the land with horse and carts was very slow. So anyway, the answer I was looking for this was the Napoleonic Wars. That was the reason the ordnance was built. I carry on down the Grand Union Canal to where I terminated my journey going south, which was Stoke Bruin, and I asked for the name of the pub on the right hand side going down and what was the museum for on the left hand side. Well, of course you all knew this one. The Boat Inn. Yes, and what makes the Boat Inn quite unique, I think, well, perhaps it's not unique, but it's been run by the same family since 1877. So yes, and a lot of you may think of the navigation as well as you go down the flight of locks. Well, the navigation actually is quite a modern pub. It may be built in an oldie-woldy sort of look, but I believe it only opened about 30 years ago, or perhaps even less. I can actually remember it opening. And of course the museum on the opposite side of the canal is the Canal Museum, or the Waterways Museum as it was once called. But anyone going to Stoke Bruin, I recommend you visiting the Canal Museum. It was wonderful in there. There's all sorts of great memorabilia and things you may not have seen before. I thoroughly recommend it, and I always enjoy visiting the museum there. We come back up the Grand Union Canal and we come to the junction with the Northampton Arm, and I go down the Northampton Arm, and the bonus question, of course, I asked, what was that junction called? Or is called, I should say. And the junction there is Gayton Junction. And just after you go onto the Northampton Arm, you'll come to Gayton Marina, and the village of Gayton is just up on the hillside. Used to be a nice little pub up there. I assume there still is. Haven't been there for years. We carry on down the Northampton Arm, and I ask you, how many locks do you have to go through to get to the river? Well, we go through 17 locks down the Northampton Arm. Yes, I think it's about 3 3/4 miles or 4 3/4 miles long. It's not very far for 17 locks, but they're all single locks, and they're not crazy deep, and they're not too bad to do as a single-handed boater. And it's not very busy down there normally either, which makes it a lot easier to transverse these locks. And of course, we go underneath the M1 when we go down. I think it's between lock 13 and lock 12. And when we get down to the end, we go out of lock 17 at the end, I believe it is. And of course, just about as soon as you leave lock 17, you're on the River Nen. And yes, I pronounce it the River Nen because we're at Northampton. And I believe at Northampton, they pronounce it the River Nen. Now, if we were joining it down at, say, Peterborough, it'd then be called the River Nene. Yes, the river changes its name, although it's spelt the same, as you go downstream. Well, anyway, that's the end of all the answers to last week's quiz. Next, I'll be giving you the questions to this week's quiz. So here's the answers again, and the positions everybody are in. That's entered the quiz, and I think we got some more people to join this week, so that's good news. I thank everybody for entering. It's for a bit of fun. I am going to put up a little prize at the end. I'm not going to tell you what it is though until the end. Well, here we go then with this week's questions. This is all on the Coventry Canal, and it's from Coventry Basin all the way up to Fradley Junction. Although my trip didn't actually make it to Fradley Junction, I was running short of questions to ask because I didn't do all of the canal. I did quite a short distance just to Faisley Junction, but I added a couple of questions on to complete the total canal, because I wouldn't be doing it at another time as a single section, if you know what I mean. Anyway, let's get on with the questions. There's a statue in Coventry Basin of a famous canal engineer. Nice easy one to start off with. I just want to know the name of that famous canal engineer. Now, as you leave Coventry Basin, you go through Bridge 1, believe it or not. Now, Bridge 1 is a little bit different to most bridges, and it's something to do with the bridge hole that is different. I want to know what is missing in Bridge 1, and I believe it is built like this originally, because the bridge looks very old. So I want to know what is missing at Bridge 1, which is on most canal bridges. Then we go on up the canal and we'll go back to Hawkesbury Junction, which, as you all know, is the junction with the Oxford Canal. Well, there's a famous pub there, of course, at Hawkesbury Junction. All I want to know is the name of that pub. After we pass Hawkesbury Junction, we carry on up the Coventry Canal. And after, I don't know, a couple of miles, 3-4 miles perhaps it is, I can't remember now. It's a long time since I went up there, nearly a year ago. We come to a junction. It's Marston Junction, which connects to another canal. I want to know the full name of that canal. Not its shortened version, I want to know its full name. And just to make things interesting, I also want to know how long was this canal when it was originally built. So there we go. That was question 4, I believe. Then we carry on up the canal and we reach the town of Atherstone. Quite a nice easy one here. I just want to know how many locks are there in the Atherstone flight, and what is the rise or fall one does when going through the flight. It's a total rise from top to bottom, the direction I went in, or from bottom to top, the direction I didn't go in. You can give it to me in feet or meters, I don't mind. Then we come to the, I don't know, it's a village or a small town of Polesworth. Beautiful little place. So I've got a couple of questions on Polesworth. Polesworth's famous for a building that's no longer there. There might be a couple of stones left and that's about it. But it's famous for this building, and I'll give you a clue. It was a religious building. So what was that building, please? That is. And also, we'll stick with Polesworth. There's a beautiful old stone arch bridge at Polesworth. I want to know what river runs underneath it. So there's a road bridge, beautiful stone arch bridge in Polesworth. What river runs underneath that bridge? We carry on at Polesworth and we end up at Tamworth. After a little while, or a long while by boat. The River Tame runs through Tamworth, and by the side of the River Tame in Tamworth there's a hill, and on top of that hill there's an old building. I want to know what that building is. What type of building is on top of the hill by the river in Tamworth? By the way, if you watched my videos going up the Coventry Canal from last year, all of these answers are in there so far. We carry on out of Tamworth and we go down through Glaston Locks, I think it is actually, and we go across the Tame Aqueduct. Now you probably thought I was going to ask you a question about the aqueduct. Well, I am sort of. As we go across the Tame Aqueduct in the northerly direction, on the left hand side, just as we get to the other side of the Tame Aqueduct, there's a very small building. I want to know what that building is. Once again, it did feature in some of my videos. After leaving the Tame Aqueduct, we come down to Fazeley. And in Fazeley is a junction called Fazeley Junction, believe it or not. I want to know what canal joins the Coventry Canal at Fazeley Junction. So we're going to go to the end of what is now today called the Coventry Canal. I know originally from Fazeley Junction to Fradley Junction, part of it originally was the it was built basically by different canal companies, and it was part of it was built by one and part was built by another, and then it was sold to the Coventry Canal, I believe, which it is called today. And if you look at a book, the Coventry Canal runs to Fradley Junction. I can't say too much more than that because it's part of the questions. Anyway, question 11 I thought we're up to. So it makes it nice and easy. The Coventry Canal today terminates at Fradley Junction. With which canal? And at that junction, this is going to be question number 12, there's a very famous pub in the boater community at Fradley Junction called the Swan Inn. Well, the Swan Inn to the locals has a rather derogatory nickname. I would like to know the name that the locals call that pub, and some boaters too. So that is question number 12, which is the last question. There was a bonus question in the video, which I've typed in as normal at the bottom of the video, so it will be worth an extra point. Well, that rounds up this week's quiz. I want to thank everybody from last week for playing and the week before, and I hope you play again this week. You probably noticed at the beginning, leading at the moment is Alison. Well done, Alison. There's lots of people close on her heels. So let's see if you can catch up this week. There will be a couple more quizzes yet to come, so you do have plenty of time to catch up. So congratulations to Alison, who is currently leading. And let's see who can catch her, if you can. So that just leaves me to say, thank you very much for watching and taking part. Trevor out.